Hey guys, BrandonioProductions here, and welcome to part 2 of how to actually use dictionaries in order to create, or using custom objects in dictionaries in order to actually create a student database application. Now, this application is actually getting pretty involved, and we've got all the basic functionality that is actually needed. So let's go ahead and add in all the advanced functionality that was intended to be in the final product, but wasn't added in part 1. So let's jump right into the code. So, as we have it, the user can type in information into the student ID, first name, last name, and average grade letter box, and actually add the student to the database. However, the user cannot actually delete a student or edit a student. So let's go ahead and do that. So if the user presses delete student, it's going to be very simple to do. All we need to do is remove the student from the dictionary, and that's that. So let's go ahead and create a new public sub here called delete student, in which the user specifies an ID number to delete. So we're going to say byval ID number as integer. Now the user should also have the option of deleting a student based on their name. However, since each student is required to have an ID number, deleting a student based on name is not a good idea. Plus, on top of that, two students could have multiple names. So we can go ahead and create this method in which a student is deleted from the ID number. So, essentially, with this delete student method, the first thing we need to do is remove the student from the student database dictionary. So we're going to say student database dot remove and then insert the ID number as the key. Now that the student is actually removed, all we need to do is refresh the list box here, and then our changes will actually be reflected within the program. So now, when the delete button is actually clicked, the first thing we want to do is actually check to make sure that a student is actually selected. So if lst underscore students dot selected item is nothing, so if the selected item is not nothing, then we are going to go ahead and proceed with what we are doing. So the first thing we want to do is extract the actual ID number. So we need to get the student information string, and that is exactly what is going to be displayed in the selected item string itself. So now that we have the student information string, we can actually extract the ID number with a simple split statement. So student ID as integer equal to cint, because we're going to cast this as an integer, and then we're going to say student information dot split, and we're going to split it by the colon because that's how our actual student information string is arranged. And we're going to get the 0th part, which is essentially the first part of that string, which should be the entire ID number. And the next thing we need to do is simply say delete student, and we're going to send in the student's ID. Now, if the user actually clicks delete student when they do not have a student selected, we could actually alert the user that they need to select a student. However, if they accidentally misclick that button, we don't want to burden them with any extra messages, so we will just leave it as is. So now if we jump back to form 1, we can actually go ahead and start programming the functionality of edit student. Now when edit student is clicked, all that's going to happen is the information from the student is actually going to go ahead and jump back into the top box where all the student information is actually inserted, but the button text is actually going to be changed to edit student. So, and everything is going to be populated with the student's information. So we can go ahead and do that now. The first thing we need to do is actually extract the student's information from the text or from the list box. So we can actually create a new student in order to keep track of this information better. Well, actually, no, that's just taking things too far. So what we can actually do is simply extract the information from the selected item in the list box. So once again, if we want to make sure that the user is actually selecting something within the list box. So if not, lst students dot selected item is nothing. So this means if the user is actually selecting something, then we can start extracting. So we're going to say dim student information as string equal to lst underscore students dot selected item dot toString. And the next thing we want to do is actually get the various parts of the the student information string itself. So, as we can see in this comment, which we are going to go ahead and just copy down here, this is what our student information string actually looks like, minus the apostrophe, of course. So the first thing we need to do is actually get the student's ID number. So we're going to say txt underscore student ID equals student information dot split, and we're going to split with the colon and 0.2 string. So, oh, we forgot to add this dot text. So when the user actually clicks edit a student, all the information is going to jump back up to the top edit group box. So the first thing we're doing is actually extracting the information that's stored in the list box item itself, and then we're going to go ahead and fill in the first text box, which is student ID, with the student information string that contains the ID. So we're splitting it from this colon here, and we're just simply getting the first part, which is this ID number. So the next thing we need to do is actually extract the first name and the last name, and then the grade point, or the average grade letter itself. So we can easily extract the first name by saying txt student ID dot text, or not student ID, student first name dot text equals student information dot split. So we're going to be splitting it by the colon again, and this time we're going to get the second half, which is this. So in this, it contains a space, and then the first name, and then another space. So we're actually going to want to split this again by space. So now what we're going to be split into is something with no characters, the first name, and then the last name here. And then, of course, this average grade letter string. So what we want to do is we want to actually get the second entry in this split, which will be the first name. So we can do this by giving it the integer value of 1, which of course in computer science is the second number, since numbers start with 0. So then we just tack on the .to string here to be sure that everything is a string. And then finally we need to get the student's last name by saying txt student last name dot text equals student information dot split colon. And then we're going to split it to its second part again, and then we're going to split this by space again, except this time we're going to get the third part of the of the string split by spaces. So the first part's going to be an empty string, second part's going to be the first name, and the third part is going to actually be the last name here. Now the fourth part of our actual split here is going to be the grade, the average grade here, that's actually contained inside of parentheses. So we can actually get this average grade by saying txt average grade letter dot text equals student information dot split, and we're going to split it once again by the colon, get the second part, then split that by space again, and this time get the fourth part of that, which is 3. And then once we do that, we are just going to want to remove these parentheses here. So instead of actually directly converting it into the text box text, we're going to say dim average grade as string, and it's going to actually contain this right here with the parentheses. So the next thing we want to do is remove the parentheses. So we want to say average grade equals average grade dot replace, and we're going to replace the left parenthesis with nothing. And then we're also going to do the same thing with the right parentheses. So we're going to say average grade equals the average grade that where the right parenthesis is replaced with nothing. So now that we've got our average grade string, we can say txt underscore average grade letter dot text equals average grade. Whew. Now all the text boxes are actually populated. So now that the text boxes are actually populated, we're actually going to change the button text btn underscore add to edit student here. So now that the text is actually changed to edit student, the user will know that they get to edit their student. However, one thing about a student is once you create the student, their ID number is actually locked. So, in order to actually prevent the ID number from being changed, because you cannot you cannot simply create a student and then change his ID number, because that could coincide with a bunch of other students' ID numbers. So the student ID number would actually be locked. So we want to actually make sure that the txt_student ID is not enabled. So we're going to set its enabled property to false, and then we can actually go ahead and move on with our code here. So we're setting the add button text to edit student, and so now we can actually go up to the add button click method. So if the button text is add student, then of course we're going to want to add the student. However, if the button, so we're going to do an else if statement. So else if btn_add.text.equals edit student, which is what we just told the button to actually be, then we are going to want to actually edit the student at hand. So what we can do is we're actually going to create another method, of course, that actually edits the student values. Well, actually, no, we don't really have to create. Yeah, we probably should create another method. So when this text is actually, or when this button is actually pressed, we are going to get the student's ID number and edit the student itself. So we're going to say public sub edit student, and then we're going to send in an ID number of a student, and we're going to go ahead and edit him to the new values. So of course he wants to be edited to a new student. So essentially when you edit a student, you're taking his values and replacing it with another set of values. So we're just going to also send in a student as a student. So now that we've got this edit student method down, we can go ahead and start coding it. So all we really need to do is remove the old student with this corresponding ID number and replace it with this new one. No questions asked. So all we need to say do is say student database here dot remove, and we're going to remove the ID number that needs to be edited. Then we're going to say student database dot add, and then we're going to add the new student with the ID number that corresponds to him. And then once this edit student method is complete, we want to change the text, the btn add.text to add student, and then we also want to make sure that txt_student ID is re-enabled, and then after that we also want to make sure that we refresh the list box, which is one thing. Oh no, we didn't forget to do that. So after the student is edited, we refresh the list box and it's all good. Everything changes back to the way it was, and we're good to go. So now all we need to do is code this functionality that happens when the button is actually pressed. So we want to actually get the ID number and get the student that needs to be changed. So in order to actually, or create a new student that we're replacing this old student with. So what we're going to do is create a new student called student to replace as a new student, and his information, of course, is containing a first name, a last name, and an average grade letter. So we're going to give it the first name of txt student first name, last name of txt student last name, and an average grade letter of txt average grade letter. And of course, I forgot to add in dot texts. So dot text and dot text here. And then all we need to do is we want to say edit student, and the edit ID number that we want to edit is cint txt_student ID.text. And then we just want to edit it and replace it with the student to replace student here. And then once we're done with that, we've got a complete program here. So we've got our edit student methods and our add student and delete student methods. So let's go ahead and test out this application. So we can go ahead and actually add a couple students here. So I'm just going to give them simple IDs. The first student is going to have an ID of 100, a first name of Bob, because that's the example we've been using, last name of Dylan, and an average grade of A. Now, The second student is actually going to have an ID number of 101. He's going to be named Brandon. His last name is going to be Mackenzie. I have no idea if that's how you spell it, but whatever. He's going to have an average grade letter of B. Let's create a new student, and he's going to have an ID of 102. Her name, let's just say, is going to be Maria Chavez. I don't know if that's a last name, but why not? She's an A student. And you get the point. We can actually populate this with a whole field of students here. So I'm just going to add one more for emphasis. His name is going to be Ryan. Last name is going to be Savage. And the average grade letter of this person is going to be an F because they don't do well in school. So there are a couple functions that we actually need to test here. Let's just say that Ryan Savage gets kicked out of school because he failed out of everything, but we forgot to delete the student. And then we want to add a new student with the same student ID, of course. So we are going to create a new student, and his name is going to be Andrew Plopper. And this kid is an A student. So we want to add him. However, Ryan Savage was actually never deleted from the database here. So would we like to replace him? Yes. Yes, we would. So now we have an updated database with Andrew Plopper being displayed. So now we can actually test out the functionality of these previous functions, or these new functions that we added in. The first one being the delete function. So let's just say Maria Chavez here decided to move, and she's no longer in our actual school. So we can press delete student, and as you can see, the student is actually deleted from our database. Now this ID is actually free to use. So we can use the student ID of 102, and let's just say a new person gets admitted into our campus, and her name is going to be Jacqueline, spelled funny as always, and her last name is going to be Rodriguez. Average grade letter is going to be a C for the student, and then we can add the student in, and it fits her right into where she belongs. Now the last functionality that we actually added into our application is the edit student application. So let's just say I spelled Mackenzie wrong, and it's actually Mackenzie instead of McKenzie. So I can go ahead and press edit student right here, and of course we go ahead and get an error. So let's go ahead and actually investigate this error here. So the main cause of this error is because if we look up at this code here, when we actually add the student into the list box, we don't insert another space after the student's last name. So we can easily just go ahead and add another space into there, and we can press run or continue, and that I don't know what that does. So now if we actually run the application again, and all of our students are gone, we can just go ahead and insert Maria Mackenzie back in here. So Maria Mackenzie is going back in with an A. And now we want to edit her because she's a Mackenzie, not Mackenzie. So if we press edit student here, well, that was actually a really bad example because she was already into the in the text box fields themselves, but that's okay because now all the information is already populated, and as you can see, we can no longer change the student's ID. So we can go ahead and make these changes. So we want her to be Mackenzie, not Mackenzie, and let's just say her grade went down. So now if we press the edit student button, she is now changed in our database. She has the same ID number, 102, but her name is now spelled correctly, and her grade now properly reflects how she performs in school. Now one thing, nope, that's it. So now one thing that did bother me about this application is when you press tab on these text boxes here, they don't actually go in order. Now this is a property of the text boxes called the tab index. So if we click on the student ID text box here, and we go to the property called tab index, we can see that it has a tab index of 3. I'm actually going to go ahead and set this to 0. The first name then, of course, is going to have a tab index of 1, last name is going to have a tab index of 2, and average grade letter is going to have a tab index of 3. Now that the tab indexes are in numerical order from text boxes, we can actually just press tab, and now it properly goes through the objects, or the text boxes inside of our application. So we can quickly switch between text boxes by pressing tab. So there you have it. Now we have a full-on little student database manager that we created on our own. Now, of course, database is kind of useless because it deletes itself when the program shuts down, but you can easily actually write this file to a text file and then read it when the program actually opens back up. So that was a very quick simulation of how you could make a small student database application. Hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching. Please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. If you have any questions, you can either ask them in the comments, send me a private message, or you could visit bpforums.info and ask your question there. The last option is actually recommended because there are several other users on BP Forums that can help you rather than just my poor lonesome old self. So thanks again for watching this tutorial, and I hope you guys have a great day. Peace.